Everybody, it's Jason with Parallel Reality coming back with you today with an article from Reason.com. It's from April 2nd. And remember this lady? It's this lady actually right here, Nita Jankowicz. It says Nita Jankowicz's defense of government censors is based on misinformation. It says everything looks like a conspiracy when you don't know how anything works, said Jankowicz. So if you remember her, she's the one that during Biden's presidential administration was going to try to make basically a misinformation. She was the misinformation czar, that they were going to put her in charge of finding misinformation on the internet. You know, like, hey, lefties out there, like something closer to actual fascism, like anything closer than like what Trump is doing right now, like a lot closer. And then she testified in front of Congress and said basically, oh, the people were lying about me. And it was like, no, we're pretty accurate, but let's go ahead and get into it. It says Nita Jankowicz is the former director of the Department of Homeland Security's Disinformation Governance Board. That's what it was called, the Disinformation Governance Board, an entity that purported to advise the Biden administration on how to best counter online misinformation, but was shuttered after drawing the ire of conservatives and libertarians. Like so many other purported disinfo experts, Jankowicz's record of identifying actual lies is decidedly mixed. Yes, because she's a communist, so she's only going to, do things that favor her side, even if it's, morally incorrect, or just factually incorrect, and morally incorrect as well. So she had dutifully joined the Intelligence Committee and much of the mainstream media, for instance, in wrongly asserting that the New York Post Hunter Biden laptop story was disinformation peddled by Russia. She personally expressed the view that the straightforward explanation, Hunter Biden left his laptop at a repair shop, was a fairy tale. Oops, yep. So our misinformation czar already is off to a bad start. It says, but like so many other former government intelligence officials who are fundamentally wrong about pivotal issues pertaining to their area of expertise, Jankowicz is fated to fail upward. She is now the president of the American Sunlight Project, a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting transparency, though the group does not disclose its sources of funding. And that's a red flag. There's the intriguing policy, some would say execrable, I can never say that word right. So the bad hypocrisy, we'll just do that. It says, was noted by Rep. Michael Baumgartner, Republican of Washington, during a fiery congressional subcommittee hearing on Tuesday. Jankowicz testified alongside one of her most ardent critics, the independent journalist Matt Taibbi, who's the guy who broke the Twitter files news, so just a heads up on who he is, whose work exposing the federal government's efforts to compel social media companies to censor contrarian speech was a major driver of negative attention to projects like the Disinformation Governance Board. And here it says that Taibbi's Twitter files, as well as similar projects like Reason's Facebook files, demonstrated that aggressive moderation of dissident opinions online was not a choice freely made by social media companies. It was forced on them by government agents who were themselves misinformed about the facts. So again, much closer to fascism than anything Trump is doing. So Jankowicz defended the American Sunlight Project's lack of transparency on grounds that she has personally faced bullying as a result of her disinfo or anti-disinfo advocacy, and she wished to spare her backers from such a fate. She also tore it to Taibbi, accusing him of failing to understand the implications of the information he uncovered and the social media censorship stories he had reported on. No, I think he did just fine, but let's see what she has to say. She wrote, Mr. Taibbi said when he was first searching through the so-called Twitter files, no, that's actually what they are called, he didn't know what he was looking at, said Jankowicz. Well, he still doesn't. Everything looks like a conspiracy when you don't know how anything works. No, what we know at this point for sure is, the government was telling Twitter what they should be censoring. That is not good. That is anti-First Amendment activity. So it looks like he does actually know what he's talking about because he did figure it out. It says that's a bold claim from someone who promoted a conspiracy theory about the Hunter Biden laptop story. Jankowicz proceeded to flatly assert that the State Department's Global Engagement Center, charged with countering foreign propaganda, was never engaged in anything approaching censorship. Says this claim is abjectly false and collapses under scrutiny. Yeah, see, again, she's someone who wants to tell you what you should be thinking, so she can't tell the truth herself. Says at issue are two independent anti-disinfo organizations, NewsGuard and the Global Disinformation Index, that receive funding from the State Department. In her testimony, Jankowicz acknowledged that these organizations were federally funded, although she defended the grants as focused on combating Chinese government propaganda rather than encouraging censorship of American media entities. We will return to that in a moment. And there's an embedded tweet from Town Hall here. It says basically what we said above, where she's saying that Matt Taibbi doesn't know what he's talking about. There was no censorship going on at the places that she worked, which is obviously going to be false. Says Jankowicz subsequently took issue with the idea that NewsGuard was biased against right-leaning news sources, and it certainly is if you know anything about it, noting that several conservative organizations, including the Wall Street Journal, the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, and Reason, what we're reading right now, had received favorable evaluations. Neither Reason nor Cato identifies as conservative. Now, Reason's usually libertarian. Cato, I don't actually know. I've heard of them, but I don't actually know. But it says, of course, alas, this is precisely the sort of sloppiness one has by now come to expect from the anti-disinfo experts. It is true, in any case, that NewsGuard favorably evaluated Reason, but the Global Disinformation Index, or GDI, is another matter entirely. This organization, a British nonprofit backed by the State Department, listed Reason as one of the 10 riskiest online news outlets and warned advertisers against appearing on the website. The GDI stated rationale for this purported danger was inscrutable. The Disinfo cops accused Reason of having unclear authorship policies, which is simply not true. Reason was far from the only disfavored news source. The GDI targeted the New York Post, Real Clear Politics, the Daily Wire, Blaze Media, the American Conservative, and the Washington Examiner. All have one thing in common. They're all conservative. As the Examiner subsequently took a closer look at GDI's operations and determined that its missives to advertisers to avoid risky libertarian and conservative news sites were partly based on the idea that these outlets were promoting COVID-19 misinformation. And now that I said that, I'm probably going to have one of those wiki notes on this video, so yay. Specifically, the GDI was shaming these websites for including commentary that COVID-19 may have leaked from a Chinese lab, which we basically know now that because of the CIA that was true. Says this theory, labeled a coronavirus conspiracy theory by the GDI, is now judged by the FBI, the CIA, and the Energy Department to be the most plausible explanation for the pandemic's origins. Oops, again. But wait a minute. Wasn't Jankowicz defending the State Department's decision to fund these disinfo organizations on grounds that they were merely using taxpayer dollars to counter Chinese government propaganda? The GDI tried to suppress the idea that COVID-19 could have emerged from a Chinese lab under lax safety conditions, a disaster that was subsequently hidden by Chinese officials. And I don't know why they haven't paid for any of this yet, but yeah, it is what it is. Given that millions of people died all over the world as a result of the pandemic, any organizations running cover for the Chinese government on this topic are effectively complicit in the Chinese government's most essential propaganda campaign. So much for the State Department paying disinfo cops to counter foreign misinformation. When it came to COVID-19's origins, the GDI enforced the misinformation, and Jankowicz is still defending it. And, it was just updated that it said that the article misstated the name of her organization and has an update here. It says, in a statement to Reason, Jankowicz contended that I never said the laptop was a Russian influence op, but I did encourage voters to exercise caution in consuming stories about it. She also claimed that when she labeled the repair shop story a fairy tale, she was merely claiming that its provenance was critical context for voters to consider. So she probably saw this and is still lying. So she's she's a name that if you see her name attached to something, just completely disregard it. She's a liar. She's just a professional liar. That's all I have to say about that. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.